2022 global growth forecast. It says the global economy is on track to grow 2.9% this year, down 1.2% from its January projection. Starting today, South Korea lifts its 7-day quarantine mandate for unvaccinated arrivals from overseas. The latest move is part of the government's efforts to restore pre-pandemic normalcy and is in line with border reopenings in other countries. The KDCA has designated monkeypox as Tier 2 infectious disease beginning Wednesday, meaning all monkeypox cases must be reported and those infected must be placed under self-quarantine, just like COVID-19.
Hello and welcome to New Day at Arirang. It's Wednesday, June 8th, 8 a.m. here in Seoul, South Korea. I'm Woo Seung.
And I'm Yi Seung-jae. Thanks for tuning in this morning, because over the next hour, we'll be giving you a look at some of the biggest headlines of the day and experts' insights on key issues facing Korea and the rest of the world. Now, the top story this morning, the World Bank has slashed its growth forecast for 2022 and also warned of stagflation risk reminiscent of the 1970s.
The bank's latest Global Economics Prospects report warned of the potentially harmful consequences for middle and low-income economies alike. Lee Si-woo reports.
The World Bank on Tuesday lowered its forecast for global growth to 2.9% and warned of risks of stagflation. According to the bank's Global Economic Prospects report, it has significantly decreased growth predictions from last year's 5.7% and January's 4.1%. The outlook for 2023 and 2024 is expected to be similar to the latest forecast. This comes as damage from the COVID-19 pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine has magnified the slowdown in the global economy.
Because of the war, we have a much larger menu of risks, and these risks, unfortunately, they mutually amplify each other.
The bank also said the global economy is entering what potentially may become a protracted period of feeble growth and elevated inflation, which raises the risk of stagflation, especially in middle and low-income economies. The report by the bank provides what it calls the first systematic comparison between the situation now to the period of steep stagflation in the 1970s. Current global economic conditions, according to the report, resemble what happened in the 1970s in that supply-side disturbances are fueling inflation. In the 1970s, accommodative monetary policy by advanced economies preceded stagflation, which mirrors steps taken by the world's leading economies today. However, unlike the 1970s, currently the dollar is strong and many developing economies now have clear mandates for price stability. To prevent history from repeating itself, the World Bank urged policymakers around the world to work to limit the harmful effects of the war in Ukraine, to fight the surge in oil and food prices, and set up debt relief for developing countries. Lee Si-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea has removed its 7-day quarantine requirement for unvaccinated travelers arriving in the country. This means this starts today. Travelers will no longer need to show proof of vaccination. In line with growing demand for overseas travel, South Korea's main airport is now back to operating 24 hours a day. Our Tae Min-jung reports.
Until now, unvaccinated travelers to South Korea were required to quarantine for 7 days when arriving in the country. But starting Wednesday, this requirement has been dropped. Now, nobody is required to self-isolate regardless of their vaccination status. This also applies to unvaccinated travelers who entered South Korea before Wednesday and are currently under quarantine.
I'm really happy to think that I can now travel overseas. I'm currently making plans to travel abroad, and so are my friends who aren't vaccinated.
This decision to lift the regulation was based on the number of infections becoming stable, as well as the easing of travel restrictions overseas.
However, travelers are still required to test for COVID-19 twice, once before they fly to Korea and once after they arrive. And those who test positive upon arrival will still need to quarantine for 7 days.
Also starting Wednesday, Incheon International Airport is officially operating 24 hours a day. After more than 2 years, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport has removed the 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. flight curfew hours. The number of incoming flights per hour has also been increased to pre-pandemic levels, from just 20 to now 40. More flights will also be available as the country looks to lift restrictions on the number of international flights in line with surging demand for overseas travel.
As a travel agency, we are delighted. Airfares have risen recently, but now with more routes available, we expect prices to drop, allowing more people to travel abroad.
Despite such moves to return life back to pre-pandemic times, authorities say they will remain vigilant with regards to inbound travelers as concerns grow over the spread of the monkeypox virus. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Monkeypox, which is now spreading to more and more non-endemic countries, has been legally designated as a Tier 2 infectious disease here in South Korea. According to the Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Agency on Wednesday, the amendment was implemented as of midnight Wednesday, meaning anyone infected with the disease must be reported and put into quarantine. Currently, 22 types of the disease are in the Tier 2 category, including COVID-19 and tuberculosis. Amid the escalating tensions on the Korean peninsula, the US Special Envoy for North Korea has again given a clear warning that North Korea could conduct a nuclear test at any time. Kim Yo-sun has more.
Special U.S. Representative for North Korea Sung Kim warned that Pyongyang seems to have completed preparations for what will be its 7th nuclear test. Speaking during a telephone briefing on Tuesday, Kim also noted there is not a clear timetable for the possible test. He reiterated what other U.S. officials have already said, acknowledging that the regime had completed preparations at its nuclear test site in Punggye-ri. Kim highlighted that Washington hopes that the regime will refrain from conducting such a provocation, which could lead to serious uncertainties in the region. The U.S. envoy also emphasized that his country maintains close coordination with its allies and partners to respond to any provocation from North Korea in a swift and strong manner. Kim nevertheless had already stressed that the U.S. is open to a more comprehensive and flexible approach towards the North if it intends to find a diplomatic resolution to solve its nuclear issue. He explained how Washington had continued to reach out to the North for talks over the past year, adding that there was no response from the regime. Tensions on the Korean peninsula have been escalating, with Pyongyang exhibiting signs of a possible nuclear test, on top of the 18 missile tests conducted so far since the beginning of this year. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Seoul and Washington responded to Pyongyang's latest ballistic missile launches. The allies had fully armed fighter jets fly in formation in a show of force. Bae-eun-ji reports.
20 warplanes fly in formation over the West Sea of South Korea. All of them are fully armed with precision-guided munitions. 16 of them belong to the South Korean military, including F-35A stealth fighter jets. The fleet also includes F-15Ks, capable of conducting long-range precision strike missions in all weather conditions, as well as the KF-16s. The remaining 4 are U.S. Air Force F-16s. Seoul and Washington conducted this exercise on Tuesday as part of efforts to put on a show of force against Pyongyang, which launched missiles 2 days ago. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the latest move demonstrated the joint defense readiness with the U.S. and Seoul's capability of hitting targets accurately and quickly in case of any kind of provocation from North Korea. The military also said it's closely monitoring the situation in Pyongyang to be ready for any additional provocations. The North on Sunday morning fired a total of 8 short-range ballistic missiles toward the East Sea from 4 different locations. A day later, South Korea and the U.S. fired back with 8 surface-to-surface missiles, also into the East Sea. The recent moves from South Korea come after President Yoon Suk-yeol, who took office last month, vowed to take a tougher line against the North than the previous administration. Bae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
Now, Seoul and Washington touched on how their close alliance has been strengthened. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Sherman met with South Korea's top diplomat Park Jin and appraised the two countries' summit held last month. They also agreed on the Yoon administration's foreign policy goal of South Korea becoming a global pivotal state. Following the meeting, Sherman posted on her social media that both countries have strengthened the partnership. She added they discussed countermeasures to North Korea, support for Ukraine, and trilateral cooperation with Japan. Now, the government set up a team to work on its approach to the new U.S.-led pact. Officials on trade, finance, and foreign affairs are looked to help create a leading role for South Korea in the IPEF. Min Soo-kyun has the details.
South Korea has set up a pan-government response team for the recently launched Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, also known as IPEF. At a meeting on Tuesday, ministries including those of Finance, Trade and Foreign Affairs met to discuss ways to cooperate closely on the U.S.-led economic initiative. This comes as South Korea seeks to play a leading role in the new pact. It also aims to actively take part in defining the economic framework that's centered around 4 pillars: trade, supply chains, clean energy, and lastly, tax and anti-corruption. The government says relevant ministries will work together as one team, but depending on the agenda, related ministries will lead the discussions alone. To maximize the benefits of joining the IPEF and to strengthen economic security, the government also plans to work with the country's private sector. A public-private strategy meeting and a consultative body for each of the 4 IPEF pillars will be implemented soon to help the government communicate closely with business groups. Last month, along with 13 others, South Korea joined the U.S.-led IPEF to strengthen cooperation with regional partners in the Indo-Pacific region. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
It's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into some of the key issues in the spotlight right now. Pfizer is seeking authorization for COVID-19 vaccine use on children 5 years and under. It will be a major step forward in the prolonged fight against the pandemic, as they remain to be the only age group yet to be vaccinated.
That's right. And how will this move change the situation, and what are other COVID-19 concerns facing the world? We connect with Dr. Kim Seung-taek, a virologist at Zoonotic Virus Lab, Institute Pasteur, Korea. Good morning to you, Doctor.
Good morning.
So, Dr. Kim, first and foremost, a COVID-19 vaccine for children 5 and under, yet to be given a full authorization. But what's your assessment on the need to vaccinate this age group, as well as the safety, but not to mention how much will this help in the prolonged fight against COVID-19?
Well, first of all, I think that this is pretty good news. So as you said, this age group is the only group that has not been just vaccinated. Just the vaccination was not available. But I think as far as I know, some efficacy and the safety should be okay. But all the details are not just disclosed yet. So, but when they actually applied for some authorization to the FDA, they will just disclose all the details, and that this will be very critically just reviewed by the experts. And also in terms of just the situation here is that now all the weapons are now just available just in terms of prevention and also to treatment. In terms of prevention, now the vaccination will be available for all the age groups. And also there are some the people that are not actually just not respond, that they are not respond very well to the vaccination, which is actually immunocompromised people. So even for that group, now the average share, this is some prophylactic, just monoclonal antibodies are also available. So now we have all the preventive measures and also some the treatment options. So maybe in the end, I think the responsibility has to be just shifted from the government's responsibility to all the individuals' responsibility.
And speaking of vaccines, it started off with, well, we just need 2 doses to be fully vaccinated, to needing 1 or 2 booster shots. Do you think COVID-19 vaccines are going to be something people will need on a yearly basis, like the flu shot?
Well, actually, there are 2 potential scenarios. The number 1 scenario is, as you said, is like just a flu shot. We're going to get some annual COVID shot. That's one potential scenario. And then the second is that there are other just endemic coronaviruses, which actually cause very mild disease, such as common cold. For these common coronavirus, we do not get vaccinated. So another the potential scenario is that we are actually being these are actually just the COVID-19, the SARS-CoV-2. will not just disappear from the human society. It will just somehow circulate and with us. So the thing is that we will be continually just exposed to this SARS-CoV-2 and there are also just variants, which means that by just being repeatedly just being exposed to those viruses, this will actually play a role of just a booster shot in the end. So in this case, we do not need any just regular just annual shot.
Doctor, also one thing that we haven't really heard much about is the use of the antiviral COVID-19 drugs for critically ill patients. So how much of a game changer have they been when it comes to lowering the fatality rate?
Well, first of all, the COVID-19 it's not just a simple disease. So COVID-19 sort of just has two different phases. So sometimes the people call this a biphasic disease. So the first phase is some virus replication phase. In this case, the drugs which can reduce virus replication can be very helpful. But in the second phase is inflammatory phase. In this case, actually excessive immune response actually damaging our body. So in this case, some drugs which can actually reduce excessive immune response can be very helpful. So based on this, the very special characteristics of COVID-19, so antiviral drugs is typically just reduce just virus replication, which would work only in the first phase of the COVID-19. And then if these drugs very effective, then it will just effectively just block the progression to the some severe COVID-19, which actually ultimately just reduce the case fatality. So now we have a very good just antivirals. The number one option is Paxlovid, which is actually very effective. At least we use this the drug within 3 to 5 days of symptom onset. We can reduce the some hospitalization by 88 to 89%. And then the second option is remdesivir. Although this is injection drugs, if we use this within like 5 days of symptom onset, we can reduce the hospitalization by 87%. And also we have monoclonal antibodies and there's some molnupiravir. Although the efficacy is a little bit disappointing, but the molnupiravir can be used for the people who has to consider some drug-drug interaction, also some kidney issues. And also in terms of anti-inflammatory drugs, which actually can effectively just reduce some mortality, we have some proven drugs, dexamethasone, which is actually known to reduce the mortality by actually 1/3. This is actually for some severe case of COVID-19, and there are some other drugs, including some tocilizumab and then the baricitinib.
And some experts have raised concerns about the summer season as it could lead to another massive resurgence in cases. What's the current trajectory like, and do you think the world needs to really brace itself for another resurgence?
Well, first of all, I think we have to consider what would be our just ultimate goal in terms of just in facing the COVID-19. The virus will not just disappear from from the human society. So somehow we have to live with the COVID-19. But the thing that we have learned in the past 2 years is that we have some we raise some immunity against the virus by either just a natural infection or just a vaccination. But whatever the cause is, we have two different kinds of immune responses. One is just antibody production, and the second one is just a cellular immunity. The cellular immunity is very good for just protecting the severe disease. But for the antibody response, this is actually good for just preventing infection. But this antibody response does not last very long. So somehow we are being when the antibody levels is just drops down, then we are actually vulnerable to the infection. But then the good thing is that since we have a very robust and the long-lasting cellular immunity, we can be actually very effectively protected from the some severe COVID-19. Although we can be very just continually being exposed to the virus and being just infected. So ultimately, based on these the things that I think this summer or so maybe in the future, I think that we are pretty much just being exposed to potentially new variants of the virus, which can be reduced by just some vaccination. But then I'm not really just concerned about any just the substantial increase of the severe cases or just the death.
Doctor, unfortunately, we are out of time, but we do thank you for your insights and really looking forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Thank you.
And that's going to wrap up the first half of New Day at Arirang.
That's right, but stick around. We have more coming your way in the second half, so we'll be back in just a moment.
Share South Korea's experience in tackling COVID-19 and introduce a Korean New Day. A Korean survivor of Japan's wartime sex slavery met with
extraordinary climate crisis and pledged to work with the EU to tackle the challenge.
The objective of its North Korea policy is
protesters gathering across the country to peacefully demand an end to hate and violence.
Arirang, what matters?
넘볼 수 없고 가질 수 없어 뚝뚝 눈물 쏟아내도 뜨거운 자태 한번 비추지 않고 내게만 가치란 그녀는 유명한 서대별 다 어딨나 In your eye 걔와 함께면 넌 디스토피아 내 발걸음 따라오면 유토피아 나의
I feel so good right now. Maybe I had a drink or two, but this somehow feels like it's forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good, but right now, maybe this is forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now, forever.
Welcome back to the second half of New Day at Arirang. Lee Jun-seok, the chairman of the South Korean ruling People Power Party, who left for Ukraine late last week, has reportedly met with President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
That's right. Lee took to Facebook to explain that his last message to Zelenskyy was glory to Ukraine. He did not disclose the exact details of his conversation with the Ukrainian president, but added that the delegation had left Ukraine. He was also quoted as saying that Seoul has a role to play in rebuilding Ukraine. Now, in the meantime, South Korea could reach a major milestone in space exploration soon. After more than 6 years of perfecting its design and trajectory, Danuri is ready for launch. Shin Yeon introduces us the lunar orbiter KPLO.
This year, South Korea will join one of humanity's greatest races ever, the space race. And it's all thanks to the KPLO, short for Korea Pathfinder Lunar Orbiter. In 2016, the Korea Aerospace Research Institute, also known as KARI, started developing a spacecraft that has recently been named Danuri. It's a combination of two Korean words, 달 and nuri, short for moon and enjoy. The KPLO will travel to the moon by taking a boomerang-shaped trajectory. This flight method is known as BLT, Ballistic Lunar Transfer. Though it will travel farther than any other orbiter during past missions, it will maximize fuel economy because it moves using the gravitational force of the sun, moon, and Earth. And the KPLO aims to reach orbit 100 kilometers above the lunar surface by late December this year, from where it will conduct a range of studies. Data will be collected from the moon using 6 instruments on Danuri. One of them, is the Shadow Cam, provided by NASA, which will investigate what's known to be shadow regions of the moon to check for resources like water or ice. A pole cam and LUTI, short for Lunar Terrain Imager, will also be attached. This acts as Danuri's eyes on the moon, providing high-resolution images of the moon's surface. The magnetic strength of the moon will be measured using a KPLO magnometer, while a gamma-ray spectrometer will also be used to analyze lunar topography. Lastly, a DTNPL device. You can think of this as an internet communication device or space Wi-Fi. This will switch on. Now let's take a listen to what Kari has to say are the determinants of success for the KPLO mission.
There are 3 key points that will determine whether the KPLO mission is successful. Firstly, whether Danuri separates from the rocket it's attached to at the exact position needed for the BLT method. Secondly, if Danuri can enter lunar orbit at an altitude of 100 kilometers by December 16th this year. It has to be punctual because if it's a bit late, it may collide with other countries' orbiters. Finally, we must be able to collect all the data we need using 6 of the instruments aboard Danuri.
Danuri hopes to carry out research until December 2023. This includes identifying potential landing sites for future lunar missions, as well as the search for usable resources on the moon. The Korea Aerospace Research Institute is going through its final checks before sending off Danuri to an Air Force base in Florida. Danuri will then blast off in early August aboard a Falcon 9 rocket made by SpaceX. If successful, Korea would be the 7th country in the world to reach the lunar orbit. 신예은, Arirang News.
Now, shopping trends here in South Korea are getting more diverse, and in terms of online shopping, it's expanding into social media platforms and even augmented reality technology. Our Lee Dae-hyun has this report.
Fashion trends in South Korea change rapidly. There are also different ways to go clothes shopping here.
I'm out here in Shinsadong, one of the most famous spots for on-site shopping. You can window shop or even try on clothes at these different offline stores. But some say they prefer shopping from their homes.
I'm an office worker and don't have much time to actually go shopping, so I prefer online shopping.
I like shopping online because I feel like there's more choice on the internet.
According to a report released by Statistics Korea, online shopping transactions rose almost 12% in April compared to the same period last year. Among them, fashion items accounted for 9.9% to over 1.6 trillion Korean won, or around $1.3 billion US dollars. This is an increase of more than 19% on year. South Korea has many e-commerce platforms, and it's not just the industry giants which are thriving. Many of the smaller companies try to reach customers through social media platforms like Instagram. One online shop owner says maintaining a social media presence is now a must.
I usually upload my daily outfits on social media to try and reach customers. Running these accounts contributes to high sales. People react more to short videos like Reels, especially than just photos.
This is because shoppers now want more realistic pictures before they buy. And so some companies are even applying the latest technology to make online shopping more immersive, such as AR, which is being used to let potential customers try items on virtually.
People consider trying items on themselves important because they want to know what suits them best before they commit to making a purchase. AR is now used as a tool for an immersive online shopping experience. It's even adding fun to it.
He added customers can select from a lot more options than before with AR, as people can even try on items that are currently out of stock. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
It's time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Now, the World Bank on Tuesday warned that the world is entering a protracted period of feeble growth and elevated inflation, slashing its global growth forecast to 2.9% for 2022. The bank added that many countries are likely to face recession, and with the prolonged impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine stretching on, the bank is also warning of the danger of stagflation as price levels currently run at multi-year highs across the world. Now, to discuss this seemingly uncontrollable global phenomenon that we're facing. We're joined by Robert Deckel, Professor of Economics at the University of Southern California, and Yang Yidong, Professor of Business Administration at Ewha Women's University. Very warm welcome to you both. And well, let's start with you, Professor Deckel. Now, let's begin with the largest economy in the world, the United States. I mean, why are price levels remaining so high, and to what extent has the Fed's tapering worked so far?
Well, there are consequences of both the demand side, which was the massive fiscal spending that the United States undertook from the middle of 2020 to the beginning of 2021. And also the very loose interest rate policy of the Fed. And that's the demand side. And on the supply side, it was the closing of the much of the service industries in the US. And so all the spending sort of went to goods and online. And also the war in the Ukraine and COVID all over the world, especially in places like Korea and Japan and China, which are important, crucial parts of the global supply chain that restricted supply. So this big demand expansion and supply contraction has resulted in this very difficult inflationary situation in the U.S. The Fed, I think, will be the first to admit that they have been behind the curve. They finally started to raise interest rates in March, and they should have raised it in the summer of 2021, when most, I think, economists realized that if they didn't predict the war, well, they knew that there's supply chain restrictions and the demand was too strong. So, and you were already seeing high inflation. So much of this was predictable, and the Fed, as it is admitting, was late in raising interest rates.
Well, at least the Fed isn't overusing the word transitory anymore. But Professor Deckel, what are you expecting to see from this week's consumer price inflation readings? And do you expect consumer demand to cool anytime soon?
I guess it was 8.3 in April, and the consensus is that it's going to be like 8.1, not much lower. You know, if there's no more price increases from, say, June until December, let's say prices are absolutely flat, then the inflation rate by December may be 4% or so, a little bit over 4%, but that's making a very strong assumption that there's not going to be any more price increases, and there could be more energy increases. Also, service sector people who were finally getting back to their jobs, they're demanding more wage increases, right? And that's going to contribute to inflation, and rents are going up. So I think it's going to be here to stay for a while, and certainly May inflation's not going to be that low, and it's not going to fall that much until even in December. I mean, we probably would have 5.5% inflation then, if not higher.
Oh, Professor Yang, now to talk about the situation here in South Korea, the government plans to raise its inflation forecast to 4%, and that's double the figure that the government presented at the end of last year. So how significant is this jump, really?
Well, you know, Korea has struggled a lot with this high the inflation rates. I mean, this year we have about 2.6 and 2.8 in January, February, and we had 4% ranges in the March and April. But in May, the CPI has increased by almost 5.4%, which is the largest in the last 13 years since year 2008. And oil prices have increased about 35%, and livestock increased about double-digit, like 12%. But more seriously, the agriculture stuff have increased almost by double. Onions have increased by double, and cabbages increased almost by 60% YOY. So KDI adjusted the estimation from 1.7 to 4.2, and BOK also adjusted their inflation forecast from 3.1 to 4.5. There are many reasons for this behind this very high skyrocketed the inflation rate. But I think that there is a mixture of both the supply and demand side. As for the supply side, you can think about the three factors. The first one is the problem in the supply chain. For example, some countries have banned the export of their wheats, like Russia, Ukraine, and India have banned the export of wheats. And Malaysia has banned the export of the chicken. And the second factor for supply chain problem is on oil prices increase due to the war between the Ukraine and Russia. And third one is a very severe drought in Korea. I mean, as of now, the rainfall stays only 52% of the last year. So what is more serious at this moment is we expect that inflation rate will increase to more than 6% in June and July. And also, even in the third quarter, our inflation rate will stay about the high 4%. So even though our inflation rate is not that bad as in the U.S., but we still have very high inflation rate for the time being.
Right, and the World Bank's report on Tuesday indeed forecast that inflation will be with most countries for the rest of the year, and while it's also downgraded the world economic outlook, growth outlook as well, Professor Yang. And the South Korean government's GDP projection for the year of 2022 is also expected to be lowered from the current 3.1% to between 2.5 to 2.9%. And well, would you agree with this forecast?
Well, the every economic institution in Korea has, announced a very pessimistic forecast. For example, the BOK, which adjusts their economic forecast every third month, had lowered the economic growth rate from 3.0 to 2.7. And IMF is even more pessimistic from 2.0 to 2.5. And KDI also adjusted the economic growth to 2.8. Well, one of the major reasons for this pessimistic economic growth forecast is on the high interest rate. The BOK had increased the base interest by 0.25% point about 2 weeks ago to 1.75. And many experts estimate that this basic interest in Korea will increase to 2.5% at the end of this year, because we are very concerned about the overturn of interest rate between the Fed and the BOK, because if our interest rate is lower than the Fed, then lots of the foreign, the currencies will flow out of this country back to the U.S. But the BOK is really, really struggling. It's kind of deadlock situation because they may consider the impacts of interest rate on both, the inflation pressure and also the economic boost. If the economic growth stays a very stagnant, a very pessimistic, or even very terrible level, probably they may adjust their original plans to increase their base interest to 2.5 to the lower level. That's what happens. I mean, it really depends on the tension between the pessimistic economic growth and also the inflation rate.
And Professor Deckel, now the Fed is also in quite a sticky situation, really. And what will it take for the Federal Reserve to lower inflation to its target rate of around 2%?
It's going to require a recession in the U.S. I mean, there's no way around it. That you can lower. Let's say in December it's 6%. Within a year, to lower that to 2%. In a normal situation, and we have a fairly strong economy at the moment. The recent labor readings, the labor market's really tight, and workers are demanding raises, and that often leads to higher prices. And the only way to stop that is to create unemployment, to lower the workers' bargaining power. Sorry to say that. So. The United States has to have even a couple of quarters of negative growth to get really the inflation rate down to 2%. And I think I don't think there's anyone who honestly would doubt that. that we would need something like that in the U.S. But I think the Fed may not go that far and sort of say, hey, 3% inflation, 3.2% inflation, we're done, and we're kind of having 2% growth. Let's stop there. I think that's about a more likely scenario than the Fed raising interest rates so high to go into a recession. So I don't think the 2%, to get 2%, they need to really slow the economy. 3.5. They may say we're approaching 2%. Let's kind of slow things down. We don't want to really kill the economy. I think those are the two things that are going to come in play. And I'd say they're about a 50. Probably the 3% outcome is more realistic than the 2% recession outcome.
Then, Professor Deckel, do you think the Fed is going to maintain its current schedule of rate hikes, the one where there seems to be?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's not that aggressive. It's saying by 2020 the maximum is 3%, and some Fed officials are saying no, we're going to keep on raising rates until we get inflation down to 2%. But yeah, I think the 3%, 3.2% in a year and a half is, very. It's the rate of increase, but still real rates. The nominal rate of interest minus the inflation rate is negative. So, that means that the cost of borrowing after inflation is still negative, and that's pretty stimulative. So, yeah, I think they'll raise it to 3%, near 3%, but that's not enough. That's not going to be enough.
Professor Yang, meanwhile, price levels continue to stay high and soar even higher. And given the surge of consumer prices here in South Korea, the government plans to roll out 8 billion won worth of discount coupons for agricultural meat and fishery products, as well as very key food items such as eggs, dairy, cabbage, that sort of thing. Do you think it's going to help? What kind of long-term measures do you think are needed?
Well, this is quite interesting and very dramatic policy by the government, because this is the second year of this policy. I mean, the agriculture discount coupon. And this coupon will apply, may help to reduce the retail prices by 20 or 30% at the moment when the consumers purchase those items. And the Korean government has at least about 24 items that could benefit from this, the discount coupon. But personally, I think the policy has a very limited impact. The first reason is this coupon may be applied very automatically at the offline retail stores. So consumers may not recognize this is the genuine, the real, or the current, the retail prices, or the result of the discount coupon, the policy. And second, this coupon is applied only up to, the 10,000 won, which is a very, very small and trivial amount. If you visit the retail stores, you may, lots of customers may pay up to like 100,000 won or 200,000 won just for the agriculture stuff. So 10,000 won limit is very, very small compared to the average consumption about the agriculture stuff, the shopping. So, and what should government do? Instead of this kind of very temporary policy, I think the Korean government need to promote and nurture the fundamental supply and demand situation. For example, the Korean government has organized the agriculture product price stabilization fund. So they should use this fund to, help our consumers recognize and feel the real reduction of the retail prices. And second, the policy is to help the problems with the drought. As I already said, the current rainfall stage only 52% of the last year. So the current government needs to invest a lot of money to promote the investment on the dam constructions and all the reservoirs, etc. So these are more the fundamental, the solutions to overcome this serious inflation problem, particularly for the agricultural and livestock problems.
My final question to you, Professor Yang. Now, the Yoon Suk-yeol government is expected to announce its general economic policy directions next month, I believe, at the Jeju Forum by Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho. But what kind of measures are you expecting to see? I mean, so far it seems that most of its economic growth policies are very conglomerate-centred. So what kind of directions do you at least hope it will set out to really enhance income security and sustainable job growth, particularly at this time?
Well, this government has clearly and publicly announced that their vision and their philosophy is almost opposite to the previous government. So they put emphasis on the initiative and drive from the private sectors. So I think their new policy will emphasize on the following three issues. The first one is they may introduce a lot of abolishment of government regulations. And that should be the first attraction that could they emphasize to track the private sectors, the market. The second emphasis on the promoting and helping the young generations job situations, because lots of 20s and early 30 young generations are suffering a lot from getting a very decent jobs. So the current government may announce some figures, some measures to help this young generation's ambition to look for and to get a very nice and decent jobs. And third emphasis will be on social welfare. But social welfare is not just for the vulnerable people. It's also for pregnancy or many, all generations, etc. So this government will announce very comprehensive and also very fundamental the new plans about the social welfare, so that less people, including just vulnerable people, will benefit from this brand new framework of social welfare. So these are three major expectations and the prediction that I have in positively from this new government announcement for the economic recovery.
Well, I'm afraid due to time, this is where we must wrap up the interview. That was Robert Deckel, Professor of Economics at the University of Southern California, and Yang Yudong, Professor of Business Administration at Ewha Women's University. Thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. Following an attack on a Catholic church in southwest Nigeria on Sunday, the number of churchgoers killed has been updated to 38 people, including women and children. This comes as local authorities announced that 5 unidentified attackers carrying 3 undetonated explosives shot worshippers outside and inside St. Francis Catholic Church in the town of Owo in Nigeria's Ondo State. Investigations into a motive for the attack are underway, however, no arrests have been made. While such attacks are common in the north of Nigeria, Ondo is regarded as generally peaceful. Residents in the area told outlets on Tuesday that schools and public gathering spots remained closed, with many choosing to stay home. Brazil has deployed dozens of soldiers following the disappearance of a British journalist, Dom Phillips, and indigenous expert Bruno Pereira in a remote region of the Amazon jungle on Sunday. According to authorities, search teams in boats and helicopters have been sent to the Javari Valley. Brazilian police have opened a criminal probe amid reports that the pair had received death threats prior to their disappearance. Police have also interviewed at least 4 witnesses in connection with the case, adding that they couldn't rule out links to gangs operating in the lawless region. Now, struggling to find a charger may soon be a thing of the past for millions of European phone users, as the EU agreed on Tuesday to implement a uniform charging port for mobile phones, tablets and cameras. Only allowing USB-C compatible connections, the groundbreaking move is set to have a major impact on Apple, as the tech giant will have to change their signature Lightning ports and cables on all iPhones sold in Europe by 2024. The European Commission remarked that the measure aims to simplify consumers' lives while saving them money, after both Android and iPhone users complained of needing to switch chargers for their devices. After being looted and cut up in the 1960s, a pre-Hispanic Mayan frieze is now close to being fully restored. Mexico's National Museum of Anthropology has been working on the 8-meter wide and 2-meter tall frieze for the last 4 years and is now in the final restoration stage. According to researchers, the ancient artwork comes from a place called Placeres and dates back to between 450 and 600 BC. It was looted and moved to New York in 1968, where artwork traffickers broke it into 48 pieces. The fragments were returned to Mexico in 1969. Colombian naval officials monitoring the sunken Spanish galleon San Jose have discovered 2 more historical shipwrecks nearby. A remotely operated vehicle that had dived 900 meters underwater to provide new videos of the San Jose found a colonial boat and a schooner, both thought to be roughly 200 years old. President Iván Duque announced the discovery on Monday. The San Jose galleon, which sank in 1708 near Colombia's Caribbean port of Cartagena, is believed to hold treasures worth billions of dollars. Images from the sunken galleon show gold ingots and coins, as well as cannons made in Seville in 1655 and an intact Chinese dinner service. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good morning. We're going to be seeing some passing rain today, so those in central regions, 전라도 and 경상북도 provinces will need to keep an umbrella handy. Rain is expected from this afternoon into the evening, with up to 40 millimeters expected, along with thunder and lightning. Clouds and rain will keep the temperatures on the breezy side, and highs will stay below the norms in most parts, and southern provinces will be cooler again. Morning temperatures are kicking off in the mid-teens under lots of clouds this morning, which are similar to the same time yesterday. Then highs in most regions will be 1 to 5 degrees lower than seasonal norms. Daegu will be topping out at 23 degrees, Gwangju at 24 degrees this afternoon. There will be glimpses of sunshine in southern regions, while decent air quality is expected nationwide today. Rain is in the forecast tomorrow for the capital region and Gangwon-do province. Then we could see some brighter sunshine on Friday with much warmer temperatures. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
Well, that wraps up our newscast for this hour, but we'll be back tomorrow for our Thursday's edition of New Day at Arirang.
Thanks as always for tuning in, but stick around for more updates in our later newscasts. Until then, have a great rest of your day wherever you are, and as always, take care.
Okay,